everyone. Today I will be talking about where Cialdini's influence topics are shown in the movie Midsommar. I wanted to preface this because this movie is within the context of a cult, so the behaviors depicted are extreme and morally wrong. I chose this movie specifically for how obvious the separate influence tactics can be to the viewer. There were many different examples in this movie of each of the three influence tactics, but for the sake of time, I'm only going to discuss one example for tactic. So let's get started with social proof. The influence tactic of social proof is probably the most obvious tactic that is shown in the movie. The main plot of Midsommar takes place in an isolated Swedish community in Hälsingland called the Harga, who have extremely cultish practices that are not known to the main cast of characters, Danny, Christian, Josh, and Mark, who are visiting the community from the United States for the summer. Since the group has never been to visit the Harga before, they are dependent on looking around to see what actions are culturally acceptable. In one of the scenes, Christian, Josh, and Mark are waiting at the dinner table and see a group of women picking flowers while walking backwards. I actually have a picture of it on the screen. A few seconds later, Danny comes up to the dinner table and hands Christian a fresh-picked bouquet of flowers. Since we were just shown that the Harga picked their flowers backwards, Christian asks Danny if she did as well, to which she responds in the affirmative. Danny knows how to pick flowers, but since she sees everybody else doing it in a certain way, she ends up following the example that is given to her. Now let's move on to liking. The tactic of liking is also seen throughout the movie. The Harga are, as previously mentioned, a very isolated group of people. They admit to keeping close tabs on their bloodlines so as to avoid serious cases of incest, and they also bring outsiders from time to time to quote-unquote mate, so that the gene pool stays open enough to avoid extreme inbreeding. It is then assumed that our main cast was brought here for this exact purpose. The young adults of the community spend some time in the outside world, presumably to make friends and convince them to come along to a trip to visit their home, which is another point of liking, becoming friends. The Hargan that the audience sees doing this is Pele, who became part of the Americans' friend group and did exactly that. Once the group of outsiders comes into the community, they are greeted with open arms, smiles, and even a welcome home from one of the elders of the community, Father Odd. Liking in this case is taken to the extreme, some would say love bombing, specifically with the female protagonist Danny. She is taken up and treated as if she was always a part of the community, even joining the Hargan women in their midsummer dance competition and winning the title of May Queen. You can see them crowning her in this picture. This tactic is common in the recruitment of new cult members because it allows them to feel like they belong and decreases the likelihood that they would ever want to leave the cult. Finally, we have authority. The use of authority is not as common in this movie as the other two tactics, but it does show up in a very disturbing way. The community of Harga has very specific religious practices and a long line of spiritual leadership who are in charge of writing and keeping up with their holy scripture, the Ruby Rudder. Only a select few are allowed to interpret the scriptures, since they are written in runic symbols from generation to generation. Authority comes into place when we find out who is in charge of writing the text and why. The Hargans carefully create heavily inbred children to take up the mantle of oracle because they are quote-unquote free of impurities and remain unclouded in their judgments. More obvious to the audience than to the characters, Hargan oracles do not have authoritative capabilities, but they are put into the highest positions of power within the community. To the Hargans, disabilities are deemed highly valuable and are placed in positions of great influence. In conclusion, as you can see, the movie Midsommar shows many examples of the use of social proof, liking, and authority as influence-gaining tactics, specifically within the context of cults and their behaviors. I really enjoyed both watching the movie and finding examples, and I hope you did enjoy listening to me. Thank you for watching.